Today, we're talking about one of my favorite topics, and that's the courage to lead. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever worked with someone or for someone and you just wondered if they could show up to lead? We understand and we know that leadership, strong leadership, is absolutely essential to the success of our companies, to the success of our families, to the success of our world, our nation. But do we see the courage to lead often? What we see is we see people who are in leadership positions, people who have the title, people who are doing extremely well at leading others and developing others and really ensuring that they are able to execute on organizational priorities in the goals and that are aligned to the mission. But then we also have a group of people who are in leadership positions, and for whatever reason at the organization that they are sitting in or the seat that they sit, they don't have the courage to lead. They've been disempowered. And as they've been disempowered, it has a tremendous impact on the people that they actually lead in the organizations in which they serve. So I want to talk to you a little bit today about the courage to lead and what that actually looks like. Let me ask you a question. Have you ever worked for an organization and you have competing priorities? Perhaps you have a number of things that need to get done. You have over here, let's say that you are launching a new function or launching a new department or a new division or expanding into another country. But you also have these other things that need to be done along the way as well. And they sometimes actually conflict, sometimes they complement. But what you do know is that for where you sit and what you're tasked with doing, what you're responsible for, that perhaps you don't have the right capabilities. You don't have the right team members. You don't have enough people. You don't have people with the right skill set. You don't have the right data points to be able to execute on what it is that you need to do. And it requires you to have courageous conversations, I like to say. And, we've heard of crucial conversations, but also, they're courageous conversations. Those are the conversations that you have to sometimes manage up or influence across the board for someone who's not necessarily always as agreeable as you would like. Maybe they have a difficult conversational style, not a difficult person, but a difficult conversational style. Maybe they're not necessarily always able to listen and hear both sides of a situation and really think through. Perhaps the person is always looking for you to solve the problem, and you're looking for them to give you some insight so that you can work together collaboratively for the greater good. And it requires you to lead. And when we mean by not necessarily requiring you to lead, the courage to lead, to stop, to say, you know what, I don't have the information that's needed to be able to make the best decision right now. Or right now, with the data that I've been given, I don't have enough data points to be able to say effectively that this is definitively the way that we can go, or that I stand behind this particular decision. And here's why. You got to be able to show the upside of a situation as well as the downside of a situation. And what we see is that sometimes you have people who can show the downside, but they can't necessarily tell you the upside of a situation. They can't sell it or influence it, or they cannot necessarily say explicitly what it's going to require for us to be able to move from point A to point B. See, as a turnaround strategist, one of the things I've been excellent at doing in some previous organizations is being able to just kind of talk about, hey, this is the obstacle. This is what we're looking at. From my understanding, this is the mission. This is what we're trending towards. This is what we would like to accomplish. This is the goal. Here's where we're headed. And here's the upside if we do it this particular way. Here's the downside. Here's what I would actually recommend. But more importantly, here's what I need and what I'm not hearing and what I'm not seeing for us to be successful. Now, of course, you don't want to say it in quite that language. You want your language to be a little bit more amenable for the people who are in the room if you want to influence them and truly get them to hear what you are saying so that they can make the appropriate decision and ensure that you have the resources. But it takes courage, especially when you're in a room and maybe your thoughts are completely different from somebody else on the team. And it's based upon what you know or what you've done in the past. And perhaps they have some historical information that you need to know of what's happening right now to be able to make that decision. Perhaps there's someone on the team who's not pulling their weight, and you need to get down to the bottom of what's really going on with that particular person. Perhaps you haven't built the relationship to go and say, hey, I noticed or I observed, or here's what I'm seeing, and can you tell me more? That is a powerful question when you have the courage to lead. No matter what the situation is, tell me more. Can you tell me more? I like to hear more about that. I like to hear your perspective on that particular situation on this. I like to see it from your viewpoint. You're bringing people together and being what I like to say a bridge for us to be able to accomplish what we set out to do. For that to happen, we've got to be able to have the courageous conversations. We got to be able to talk to each other. You've got to be able to understand where I'm coming from in the seat that I'm sitting in. And I've got to be able to understand and hear you as well, and recognize that you may have some information that I don't need to hear. But for us to be able to ensure that we're on the same team, sometimes it requires you stepping up, and maybe it's with your manager, and I know that a lot of times you have leaders who don't want to rock the boat with their manager. They don't want to challenge their thinking. I like to say, push their thinking. You want to push their thinking and get them to see, hey, what about this view? Have we considered this? Or will you give me the opportunity to share another perspective? I'd like to share another perspective if you're open to hearing it. And do we often say that if you're open to hear it, or is now a good time for me to present something different? And you got to understand the timing, right? Because every organization, every meeting is different. Your relationship with your leaders are different, and they're human. And so do we give them the ability to be human? Because the courage to lead, you're going to have to say, hey, I've made this decision. Here's the decision that I've made. And everyone may not necessarily agree with this decision. Everyone may not necessarily see this particular viewpoint, but I heard you and I took into consideration what you actually shared, your viewpoint from your perspective. I absolutely heard you. And I've made the decision. Here's the decision that I've made. Here's why I made that decision. And I think it's important for people to actually know why you make the decision. So often we make the decision and say, we're moving so fast. I'm going to do this, or yeah, we can go ahead and go down this road. But do you ever stop to share with them why you made that particular decision? And then even ask them, how are you feeling about that? How does that make you feel? People want to be seen. They want to be heard. They want to be known. They want to be included. But the courage to lead is sometimes you're going to have to make some tough calls. And with those tough calls, you may have to say no. Sometimes the courage to lead is you're going to have to push back or influence someone who thinks differently than you, who sees things totally different from you, and being willing to have the conversations. Have you ever worked with someone who never considers another perspective, who never pushes back with leadership? And again, it's not about pushing back. So I want you to hear me clearly. It's not about pushing back, but it's about making sure that you're pushing their thinking. You're sharing things from another perspective, a better way, a simpler way, a faster way, a more efficient way for us to get done what we want to get done. Sometimes we're so passionate about our viewpoint and our perspective that we don't consider other people or the impact of our decisions. And I truly believe for you to be an effective leader, you've got a strong leader. You've got to consider the impact of the decisions you make, not just on your team, not just on the customer, but the employees, the organizational view. And I really love working with leaders who can see things from a world perspective, from a shareholder perspective, from a board perspective, getting outside of the room that we're in and really thinking through, what's the impact here? What's the impact here? What's the impact here? Because if you're making big decisions, then you don't want to make them in isolation, right? And the courage to lead may say this is best for our employees, but it's not necessarily best for our customers. It's best for our customers, but it's not necessarily best for the shareholders. And so you've got to be able to have that balanced perspective, that different perspective where you're looking at things and you're able to evaluate based upon what you see, based upon the seat that you actually sit in. What is best? What's best? The courage to lead may say, you know what, this person is excellent, but they're not necessarily in the room right now. We can't have them in the room right now. Or maybe be able to say, you know what, yeah, I'm going to bring this person to the room. I'm going to invite them to the conversation, whether you believe that their position qualifies to be in the room or not, the space, because they have a unique perspective. They have some additional information they can share. And I get and I understand what you're saying, but the courage to lead says they have to be here. The courage to lead says, I'm going to be brave. And so I know that I can get some pushback and some fallout about this, but this is the best decision that we can make. And we're going to make this decision. And we're going to think about what's best for our brand, what's best for our reputation, what's best for the employees, what's best for the customers, what's best for all who are impacted. And based upon that, I'm going to make the decision and move forward, or I've made the decision and I'm going to move forward. And I know it may be against unpopular beliefs and opinions, but I stand by it based upon what I'm looking at, because I'm going with the information that I see, but I'm also trusting my gut, my intuition. And what I wished I would see more leaders, rather not most, more leaders, there are some leaders who are doing it and who are doing it well, is begin to trust your gut. What does your gut say about this? What does your intuition say about this? Not necessarily leading with how you feel, but a good part of being a leader is being able to trust your gut, trust your team, but also trust your gut. Trust your intuition. What is it saying? What is it speaking to you? What it just feels right. And being able to say, you know what? This is a gut decision. This is, my instinct is telling me to go with this. I know I'm looking at 2 resumes and this person is strong and it looks like they would be the best person for our team, the best person for our organization. But when I step back and I look at it, my intuition is saying I need to go here. And so I'm going to go with I'm going to have the courage to make a different decision than what the data is showing, of what I think people will like for me to do. And being able to stand on that. The courage to lead says, we may have 5 initiatives that we're pushing forward, but realistically, I'm going to burn my team out and run them off if we implement all 5 right now. So perhaps I need to negotiate and influence someone to say, you know what, we can only support these 3, or we can only support 2. I only have capacity. I'm really concerned about the mental health of my organization, my team. I'm really concerned about them working extremely long hours. I believe if I continue to do so, I'm putting them at this particular risk. And so let's talk about, what their capacity to give is right now. That's the courage to lead. The courage to lead yourself and your families may be able to say, you know what, here's the direction we're going, family. That we're going to sit down and we're going to talk about this, and this is what we're actually doing. So I want you to think about that. I want you to think about, as you are, whether you are a leader of a large team or senior executive, or if you're a human resource professional, perhaps you're just a frontline, not just, I don't say it that way. So, hear my heart and not necessarily the words I'm saying or speaking rather. But I'm a frontline manager, or I'm a middle manager. And so what does the courage to lead look like for you? What is it that deep within is the right thing to do and the best thing to do? Can you lead with honesty? Can you lead with integrity? Can you lead with bravery? That's the courage to lead. The courage to lead is being able to lead yourself first. It's aligning your leadership with your morals, your mission, your vision, your values, and aligning that to the organization. It's knowing when to stay. It's also knowing when it's time to leave. And so with that, I want you to really think through, what does the courage to lead look like for you in your organization where you are now? Does the courage to lead say, you know what, I need to step it up a little bit? Or does the courage to lead to say, you know what, I'm not really feeling this, and so I need to perhaps exit out and do something different for a while? Maybe the courage to lead says, I'm excellent at this industry, but I want to do something different. I want to have more of an impact. What does that look like for you? Now, if you need help with figuring out how can you put together a plan that you can execute flawlessly as you are leading, as you're having conversations, if you need a plan or someone to talk through, just-in-time coaching perhaps, or perhaps you need a concierge coach, somebody who's on a concierge who can just meet with you and talk through things with you. Sometimes we need someone we can talk through our decisions with and make sure that it makes sense, or how do we present this to the team? I would love to be that person for you. All you have to do is message me at spayne, and so that's my first initial last name, spayne at smpistrategies.com, and let's talk through figuring out what a coaching program actually looks like for you, your team, as you're developing the ability to lead more deeply and more profoundly as you're leading with courage. Blessings to you, and I will see you guys back here next week.